What's special about Bitcoin? The most special component, in my opinion, in regards to this conversation is scarcity. So really, when we talk about debasement, or we talk about this idea of something losing value, by necessity, I think it's important that we say against what. When you compare Bitcoin to dollars, or you exchange them, the exchange rate of these two assets has always favored Bitcoin and since the inception of Bitcoin.
Information presented on this program is believed to be factual and up to date, but we do not guarantee its accuracy, and it should not be regarded as complete analysis of the subjects discussed. Discussions and answers to questions do not involve the rendering of personalized investment advice, but are limited to the dissemination of general information. A professional advisor should be consulted before implementing any of the options presented. Encompass More Asset Management LLC is a registered investment advisor with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission and only transacts business in states where it is properly registered or is excluded or exempted from registration requirements.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Tall Oaks Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Ducharme, joined in the studio today by my co-host, Carissa Bertrand, and a friend of ours, Aaron Olson, who's been a former guest recently talking about Bitcoin. Aaron is kind of my go-to resource for all things Bitcoin. And he's got a lot of deep personal experience that you're pretty open about sharing. And, you know, anyone that cares to go listen more about that. We're talking about this idea of debasement, and Bitcoin's part of that framework. So for anyone that hasn't listened to the other episodes around this, it's a mini series, and it's this idea that what debasement is, and there's 5 asset classes that we think people should be considering as part of their total portfolio allocation, or their net worth throughout this secular cycle of debasement. And so it's high quality real estate holdings, large cap U.S. stocks, precious metals, Bitcoin, and liquid alternatives. Those are five assets. They give you diversification. Generally, the idea is hopefully they kind of all end in a similar place, but path, the road traveled, right, may be different.
Yeah.
Carissa, recap for everyone really quick, just what is debasement? And I think that's a segue into where we'll bring in, okay, well, how does crypto or Bitcoin specifically fit into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So whether you've listened to the previous episodes about debasement or you're just joining us now in this episode, debasement is really when the value of currency is degraded over time, right? And so it has to do with inflation, it has to do with purchasing power, but essentially your dollar is buying less and less over time. This has happened throughout the history of the world. We've talked about that a little bit. And then if you want to think of it in like very simple terms, you could think of a soup and how you have that soup. And then if you add water to it, you have more liquid in the soup, but there's less substance there. And so that's very like a good analogy, I guess, to what debasement is and how that works with the currency is that, yeah, there's more of it going around, but there's less substance to it, right? So we're going to segue into how Bitcoin is one of those hedges that we are talking about to help, I guess, hedge against currency debasement and why maybe you should have that in your portfolio, some of the considerations around that. So,
and before we get into that, I want to highlight for people and remind them, like, and although Aaron, you might disagree with me, right? I think you should be really measured in how much of your net worth you choose to put into something like Bitcoin, and it has to do really with the larger framework that we're working with here, which is at some point in secular cycles, you have volatility in any kind of financial market, whether it's the stock market, the bond market, real estate, cryptos, and people get rinsed. You get liquidated, you have to sell, right? Life still happens, and so although you might look at an asset class and say that in a vacuum, this asset class may have the biggest upside potential over time, you really still can't go all in on that one asset, because if there's a period between point A and point B that wipes you out, you got to be able to make it to point B for it to even be worth something, right? So that's like my quick disclosure, and disclaimer for everyone, is be really measured in that and take, I think I've got a little bit of a concern, Aaron, that as we have this conversation, people may be, Bitcoin has this really compelling story when you first hear it and get to know it. And I just want to remind people, like, be cautious.
Position sizing is important.
Position
with
sizing
any assets, making sure it fits within that overall financial plan.
One of the things that makes or breaks portfolio managers is position sizing,
Yes.
right? So whether you're a professional portfolio manager or you're your own portfolio manager in your own life, right? Like, be measured in what you're doing and have some reason for the what, the how much, the when, and the whys.
Yeah, markets have the ability to stay insolvent longer than you.
Markets have the ability to stay irrational longer than you have the ability to
longer
stay
than
solvent.
you to stay solvent. Yeah, thanks for the quick correction.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the sentence that I like to turn to, is like, you think you can outlast this market. You think you can, you could cash flow the void or the dip, and then all of a sudden time comes up, costs come up, family needs come up, business expenses come up, and all of a sudden you find yourself selling when that asset hasn't recovered from the lows, and you find yourself getting rinsed, getting washed out.
So give us like a really quick, intro. Obviously, there's a lot out there on Bitcoin, and certainly we've filmed up an episode on it in the past. There's an interesting episode if you listen to that one. I also did one with a friend of mine, Mike Green, that was kind of the potential drawbacks of Bitcoin. And I think it's worth, if you're going to be an investor in Bitcoin, like, listen to both sides always, right? Like, be well informed and kind of know what you're getting into in a sense, right? Why does Bitcoin provide some kind of debasement hedge, or like, why is it an asset class that can be considered in this framework of, hey, the government's printing money, which means they're taking my purchasing power every time they print more money and give it to somebody else? How does Bitcoin help solve that? Because, Aaron, it's just, funny money in the computer or whatever.
Digital dollars. Or
yeah.
digital figures.
How does that sort of work?
Well, I like to frame this conversation by backing it up a little bit and talking about the real problem in the room. And for me, the real problem in the room is the denominator is broken. And what do I mean by that? So far, we've had reference to our dollars losing value. And we've had reference to debasement, or this dilution effect that we're talking about. But anytime we make a comparison or we try to establish the value of one asset, we almost by necessity have to establish another value to compare it against, to give us the contrast. Because what does it do us any good if we just had a bucket of dollars and it kept growing and growing and growing? What eventually are you going to do with those dollars? Where are you going to take these things and exchange them to get what you want in your future, right? So really, when we talk about debasement, or we talk about this idea of something losing value, by necessity, I think it's important that we say against what. So like, let's visualize this. The American dream, we want a home. A lot of people want a home. And right now, it takes quite a bit to get a home. We got to get the deposit. We've got to find a lending institution that believes that we're, worthy enough to pay it back. We have to have a job, or we can save up all this dollars in my bucket and exchange them for this house. So when we take the house, we're going to put that, just like old division, we're going to put that as the numerator, the thing on the top. And we're going to say, of this house, how many of these things on the bottom do I need in order to buy one of these? And I guess when we're looking at that, that's where people really discover true debasement in their life. How many of these things do I need on the bottom, the denominator, to buy a Big Mac, or to buy a house, or a Honda Accord? Now, why is that important? Because we're comparing asset classes here. We're looking at stocks, bonds, land, precious metals, liquid equivalents, Bitcoin. We're looking at these different things and saying, which one of these things is either going to, one, store my value better over time, or we're going to say, which one of these things can I carry with me into the future with a degree of certainty that I'll be able to exchange it for something that I want. So carrying something with you really is a function of considering the future and what that looks like. Will the future be 100% Chinese? Will it be 100% United States controlling the earth? Will it be dollars or will it be pesos? Will it be gold or will it be a bunch of Bitcoin heads like me running the earth? And are we willing to trade our services, our goods for whatever you want to trade in the future? So when we think about this, specifically for dollars, because that's what we're talking about, most people are talking about listening to this podcast, is that when we put the dollars underneath in the denominator, we're finding it's taking more and more and more of these things to get whatever thing we're seeking.
Mm-hmm.
And as time moves on across the timeline, we discover that it takes even more and more. It's not that the Honda Accord is being built out of any better metal or leather or the engine is more powerful. In fact, quite the opposite. A lot of times they're being built under cheaper materials, more cost-efficient ways, now with robots instead of labor, all with the prime objective to reduce the number of units, nominal dollar units it takes to buy one. But we know from the time when I was a child, and the Honda Accords looked a lot different in the 80s compared to now. But from the time in the 1980s, that Honda Accord until now, the current Honda Accord, it has gone through quite the transformation. One thing I can tell you for certain, that it takes more of the dollars in order to get one unit of Honda Accord, regardless of the configuration. So when we start thinking about things, I want you to think first and foremost about the denominator. If we're thinking about saving, okay, I need X amount of units in the future to provide for my grandchildren, to provide for my family trust, to buy a home or a cabin to enjoy in my last retirement years. I need to have a degree of certainty that the amount or pile of units I have that I'm planning on trading or bartering for this cabin will indeed be enough. And what we're finding is that healthcare costs more money. Food costs more money. Cars, houses, services, goods, an hour in a studio like this, it's all costing more of these units. So that first is the very first and most important concept to understand is, what is your objective? Is your objective just to achieve more dollar units? Or is your objective to be able to achieve and get the things that you want in your future and the things that you want to enjoy in your future? And really, most people come to the conclusion really quickly, it's not the paper that you want. It's not the printed paper that says US dollar on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think we identify this a lot with clients. We talk about it in the office as the illusion of safety.
Yeah.
Right. It's this idea of like, oh, I have, Carissa and I, we had the honor of meeting with somebody yesterday that has quite a bit of money in CDs, and they felt very safe and secure with that idea, and they're making, 3.5-4% a year. Right. And so they feel like that's a really safe play. And certainly the regulators, at the federal government level or the state level, they agree. They say that's a really safe investment for somebody to make, right? And the financial planning textbooks say that's a really safe investment. And, and then here's kind of crackpot theory Brandon out on Twitter, X, saying the next 20, 30 years, the risky thing to do is to probably be not risky. And the reason why is, you can make 3% on your cash, but is that 3% going to be able to buy you, like you said, the same numerator then, in time and space?
Yeah.
And if the answer is just no, well, then it's all of a sudden not so safe.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not the objective. Right?
It's not meeting the goal. It's not meeting the true goal. It feels good in the present. Like, oh, I can't lose my money, or it's very tough to lose my money, but you're losing the ability to accomplish what you're wanting to do or use it for the thing you're wanting to use it for by the very nature of it not being productive enough for you.
You guys might be too young, but do you remember VHS tapes?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, I'm not that young.
Okay.
But
I'm not sure. Okay. All right.
Blockbuster, I'm familiar.
Yeah. Okay. Blockbuster, right? And
That's Friday nights.
obviously we read books here in this group. Obviously we know the value of a book, right? At one point, it was a really cool thing to have 100 VHSs in your library. Like, it was amazing. Like, whoa, look at all the Disney movies you have. Look at all with the special covers. Remember, they had the little bit different cover.
Yeah.
Like, at one point, to have the safety of all these things, it was just this amazing thing, right? And then something changed. The format changed. And it wasn't that the movie itself, it wasn't that the VHS or the movie that was recorded on that VHS in your library, nothing changed about that. Like, we could have popped it in the VCR and we could have played it, and it still probably worked today. But for whatever reason, these VHS libraries just somehow vanished. In fact, if you go to any thrift store, I'm sure you could find an endless amount of VHS they're willing to give you for free. I'm not so certain they just don't throw them away now.
I think they do, actually.
Yeah.
I think it's VHS players actually pulling a premium now.
Oh, for real? Okay.
I think so.
So
Yeah.
we've entered in the nostalgia collectible
Yes.
phase
Yeah.
of VHS.
Yes.
Point being, the point I'm trying to make is the movie itself didn't change. In fact, the same movie. The experience putting it in, a little bit, 1080p versus whatever resolution you get on the VHS. But in reality, what's really happened is that format and the value of that VHS changed. And we have to ask ourselves why. What things about it changed, made it a better option to release that, and now have an Apple library, movie library, or the ability to rent any movie in the world. And so again, getting back to where we're trying to look at the debasement trade and which of these asset classes are the best to choose.
Yeah.
You asked me a question about Bitcoin and what makes it special and why. And fundamentally, there are differences in these asset classes that we should all look at and try to understand so we can make the best informed decision of what the future is going to think
Yeah.
that is the best mode to save the value in, right? So Bitcoin, what's special about Bitcoin? The most special component, in my opinion, in regards to this conversation is scarcity, okay? Now, I come from a gold background. I loved gold before Bitcoin ever showed up in my world. And the reason why I liked gold so much is because everybody in the world understood gold and valued it and wanted it, whether it was jewelry, whether it was the gold bars, whether it was something that looked like gold, how it's gold plated. All of those things were something that everybody understood. I didn't need to be taught about gold. It was just in everything. The culture, the movies, the music, the conversation, the coins, everything that everybody wanted, there was some tie to gold. And the literature, just everybody, just like it was just there. So that was a fundamental thing that I recognized real quick. It's like, hey, everybody understands this thing. Like I was like born into understanding. It was so permeated. So the network effect or the size of the amount of people in the world using gold to exchange or barter was fundamentally and is fundamentally very, very, very high, right? Huge network, right? Now, when you look at something like a individual currency, or let's say an individual stock, well, some U.S. stocks, they're only traded in the United States. You can't buy some U.S. stocks in other markets because you have to have access. You have to have access to those exchanges, to those markets, to the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, or whatever, right? You have to actually have regulatory access to those things. You have to use what those markets are denominated, mostly in dollars. And those are restricting factors. So when you looked at that asset class, you start to realize like, wow, there's some real constrictions on who has access or how many people have access to basically do commerce using that token or that asset. Then we look at cash, like dollar bills. Like, yeah, dollar bills have been extremely successful because they have been dispersed and permeated most of the globe and recognized as a quality store of value. And at least for, our recent history, 180 years to 200 years, the dollar as the world reserve currency has been used and denominated for one of the most fundamental commodities in the world, which is oil. Mm-hmm. And because of that, everybody understands and recognizes dollars. So again, that network, massive. So when I look at one of the first things that distinguishes between Bitcoin, bonds, land, or these different things is how big is the network or the amount of people that want that thing? Remember, we're trying to change two things here at the end. Mm-hmm. We just don't want a bucket of dollars to fill our coffin up and like lay in it, so because it feels so nice.
We're focused on that exchange of value.
Yeah,
right?
There's an exchange of value. We want whatever we hold to be the most valuable thing, and we want to make sure that somebody else sees it that way too. Perhaps sees it even more valuable than you see it, because that's your opportunity to be able to make that exchange. Mm-hmm. So number one, network effect. How large of a network is interested? If I want to, if you're Chinese or you're Indian or you're Taiwanese and you wanted to buy land in the United States, okay, is there a way for them to do that? Can the entire Japanese populace buy land in America? No, probably not. Some can, some can't, some know how to do it. The point is land, that's one of the restrictions. That's one of the things that kind of limits land, is there's a physicality part of this, right? So for somebody to buy this land, like you almost got to bring them out to Utah. Hey, check out my acre on Red Cliffs Preserve. Pretty nice, right? Yeah, and then they have to want or desire to either do commerce there or live there. So again, there's some factors kind of controlling the exchange of that good. It's back to the exchange of those goods. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that number one is network size. Is it desired? Is it wanted? Number two, the other thing is, what are people buying and what are people selling? That's kind of how I define money. I know that sounds really, really weird, but if you meet somebody who's very wealthy, and the things that I consider money are the things generally that person or the largest holder of that particular thing, if they're buying more of it, I view it as money. And the reason why I say that is because they're buying it for the intrinsic value of that thing, that token that they're buying. So what I mean by that is if they're buying, like I consider like NVIDIA stock, okay? I consider that money. The largest holders on earth, the biggest investment banks, the biggest private wealth funds, the insurance fund, whatever you want to point to, sovereign funds, they have a chunk of it and they want more of it. They're buying more of it. They're not selling it. That to me is another indicator for me as to what I consider something that's being valued. Something that I consider money, because it actually has a market and somebody wants more of that thing. It has more value to that thing. We can stop there for a second if you have questions. I see eyebrows popping up and.
Well, I think I disagree with you on the NVIDIA example.
Okay.
But more so NVIDIA specifically, and less so on the intention of the example. The example makes sense to me.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it could be Apple stock.
XYZ stock, whatever.
Yeah. Or it could be,
Well, actually, I think there's a company now, XYZ stock, that trades. So you can't use that. You can't use that
example.
It can be Bitcoin. It can be land. Like
anything that somebody is valuing.
Yeah.
Right?
When's the last time you saw somebody on Las Vegas Boulevard, like excited to tell you how they sold off a block of Las Vegas Boulevard.
Monopoly. That's what it
You know
makes
what I
me
mean?
think of.
You know, when's the last time
Yeah.
somebody in 90210 in Beverly Hills was like, oh yeah, we made this killer profit on this beachfront property, we sold it. No, you never hear that. What you hear is you hear that person that owns that thing saying something, yeah, you know what, we're working and looking forward to the next big deal that we're about to make. We're going to acquire more of this thing. They never brag about what they sold.
Yeah. I mean, in some circles you hear it, but I suppose that's a more finite experience.
Sure. Or maybe at that moment, they value dollars more.
Mhm.
Do you see what I'm saying? Like if you're bragging that you just sold a block of Miami beachfront property or whatever, or Manhattan real estate.
Well, no one brags about that because it has yet to go down. But
Okay.
but
There we go.
but I will tell you, I have a good friend that will sit and brag about how he walked into a bank in early 2007 down in Phoenix and said the last couple lots he had on his books, he said, I know where this market's going. It's going to default. What kind of check do I have to write for you to just take it back today?
Mm-hmm.
And he just turned it back over to the bank. He basically got out at nearly the top of the market, right? He sit and brag about selling all his real estate and unloaded it in time. It only made sense. It only makes sense to brag about it in hindsight because the price did in fact go down, right? But you're not going to hear that about Miami Beach because Miami Beach hasn't gone down yet, right? Or beachfront property in 90210 or whatever hasn't gone down yet. But if you are around the wealth game long enough and you talk to enough people, you do hear the stories about how they did sell, near the top, right? I mean, I think there's examples, I believe, and I'm going to hedge here so that he doesn't sue me, Mark Cuban talking about, selling his company to, was it Yahoo, whatever, right? And he's like, man, I'm made out great.
He got an exit.
You got an exit. Like, and so there are stories about people that do time things and have the exit liquidity event happen. It's just, I think that's a fair counterpoint to make, right? Is like timing still does matter and everything. Now, some trends are bigger and longer, but it's not commonly talked about. And one of the reasons it's not commonly talked about, I think, is because in the wrong settings, it's a really unsavory conversation to say, yeah, I unloaded my bags on someone else.
Yeah.
In essence. So you just don't hear the brag about it nearly as much as we own it and it's going up and we're still doing more deals and getting wealthier. That's a little bit more.
And I think you can also go back to that idea of value, right? Like some people value, like you said, the dollars or the output more than the input. Like, so it just depends on what they're looking for out of that exchange, right? So I think that's just another piece to consider. Like if somebody's selling that property out in Malibu, maybe it's not that they want to live there anymore. They don't really care about that property, like whatever. They want to get out and be able to go and do something else with that
100%.
that unit of value that they're getting from selling that property to do something that they care about more.
Sure. And with those types of options, we've got to remember that there are other things that you can do, right? You can mortgage or leverage a property and borrow dollars against it and still achieve more or less what you're trying to do. So at the end, yes, the person who has custody of the asset gets to decide what gets done. Mm-hmm. The point I was trying to make, and maybe I didn't do very well at it, was that there are things that are very clearly that don't go down in value as quickly as others.
Yeah.
And they have a very, very good track record of keeping their value across time. Now that's the thing that makes
the tricky part.
That's the thing that makes Bitcoin so special and some other hard assets so special, is because as time goes on, it's had a record of having more value, not less. There are periods in which it's volatile, absolutely. Drawdowns of 70, 60, 80%.
Yeah, we just saw that recently.
Which are can be a lot, especially if somebody's not used to doing that. But over the course of a 17-year history for this asset, it started at zero. And it now is worth $100,000+, right? And why? Why has it across that amount of time kept its value and outperformed every other asset class since it started.
I believe because there's been more buyers than sellers.
Okay, perfect. There's been more people valuing that higher than other things in their life. We agree.
Yeah. It's one of the things that interests me about Bitcoin is it's very whether you see it as a feature or a bug, it's relatively transparent, right? I would argue very transparent. I think you would agree. You can audit everything in a public setting essentially that happens on the network. You kind of know exactly how it all works. You might not know who owns it, but you can see how many Bitcoin are out there, how many are getting transacted, how many are getting held in a wallet, what wallets now appear to be frozen and essentially lost to time potentially. It allows for this now finite measure, right? So if we started saying, like one of the common things people talk about is like, if you take all the gold in the world, it just fills up an Olympic swimming pool. Like there's not that much gold. It's an interesting thought, but is it an Olympic swimming pool, or is it an Olympic swimming pool plus 3 buckets, or is it not quite, but close to a full swimming pool, right? Because there's more coming out of the ground, potentially theoretically more could fall from space. Gold could theoretically rain from the heavens. You don't know. It's not mathematically provable how much gold is truly in existence, right?
Yep.
And whereas Bitcoin, it's very provable.
Yes.
What that does though, is it allows you to almost look at it and still say, okay, well, the economics of this is somewhat more like pure and in a vacuum now, because it really comes down to just the pure fundamental framework of supply and demand, because there's not this unknown, right? Like if you look at gold, and I make a joke about like buyers and sellers, because that's what Scott Bessent said, like last week. They asked like, wow, how come gold's gone up so much? And he says like, I think it's because there's more buyers than sellers.
Gold has killed it this year, but it's done great. Yeah, it's done fantastic.
But I guess what I'm saying is like, you can only sit and speculate. Well, has it gone up because more central banks are buying, or because somehow, gold was shot into space in a rocket and is unrecoverable, so there's less of it now? Or is gold going down this last week now because a new mine was discovered and there's going to be more supply coming to market? And, you don't know for sure, right?
Well, again,
Bitcoin, for sure.
Yeah.
But what it allows you to do now is, once you can take out the speculation, or like, well, why is it going up? So Scott Bessent's framework of, more buyers than sellers is very accurate in Bitcoin. Why is Bitcoin going up? More buyers than sellers. Why is Bitcoin going down? More sellers than buyers.
Supply and demand.
Literally the only force that impacts it, right? Because you can't bring more in. You can't really burn it. I mean, I guess you could burn it. I mean, right? Like I could just try to buy up all the Bitcoin and, I don't know.
Destroy.
You can make it inaccessible.
You can make it inaccessible.
Yeah.
But I think that's what I'm saying is you can almost monitor that and potentially see that in some of the original wallets.
You're right. You can measure that.
But it's measurable. It's measurable. And also at this point, in case anyone was wondering, I don't have the capital necessary to effectively move the market on Bitcoin. It is in a vacuum. And so the thing that I find interesting about it though is that you're rewarded for Bitcoin, and you talk about intrinsic value. And I almost disagree with you on that point, because I think there is no intrinsic value. There is no true internal value to Bitcoin, right? Like there's, and even for gold or silver, if you look at it and you look at the intrinsic value as far as a pure utility, what can you do with the gold or silver?
Number of protons in AU, element AU.
It's like gold's way overvalued, right? Like if you look at it,
Maybe.
if you look at gold as purely a commodity, right? Like, what can you use it? It's industrial applications,
Yeah.
So this is probably overvalued.
Or it just has a monetary premium on top of its commodity value.
Yes, 100%, right? And so, like on Bitcoin, it's all monetary premium. There's no commodity value, essentially.
I mean, it's the first decentralized, right? First decentralized, immutable accounting ledger that is always in consensus that mankind has ever come across. That is, just because we can't touch the MP3 inside the audio wave file or inside this audio file because it doesn't have mass, doesn't mean that it doesn't have an intrinsic value of the noise it produces when we play it through the player, right?
But I'm gonna sit and argue like the intrinsic value of the intrinsic value of Taylor Swift's hit record in an MP3 file has no intrinsic value. The cash flows it produces for Taylor Swift and royalties and whatever can be quantified and discounted into the present, and you can value it, but the intrinsic value is somewhat limited. It has very little true utility required for survival in society, right?
Okay. If you're defining intrinsic value as utility for survival, you're probably right. It has
yes,
zero.
that's what I'm right.
But so does gold.
Well, that's what I'm basically the point I was making. It's very, very little okay. Compared to that was my whole point, right?
Okay.
Maybe I'm not in the right line of thinking here, but I guess what I'm thinking is that extrinsic value that Bitcoin has, right? Because there's that value that people are wanting it, so they're buying more, right? What is making people want to continue buying more, and what happens when that stops? What happens to that value for each unit of Bitcoin when that extrinsic value stops or goes away?
Yeah, again, we keep talking without naming the denominator, so I'm going to keep naming it.
Okay.
It's important that we say value, we're thinking in dollars, and we're programmed to think in dollars. Culturally, we're there. But remember, the first discussion we had was all about the barter, the end barter, that trade for your life, for your survival,
okay,
for your need. You trade all sorts of things: water, gold, commodities, Bitcoin. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. If right now I could take my shoes off and go exchange it or barter with somebody at Maverick for 5 years worth of gasoline, I guarantee you I'm going to do it right now, right? I'm going to go take advantage of that opportunity, of that arbitrage between what I value, which is the gasoline, 5 years of it, and some shoes I have on right now. So again, we always have to remember, you're saying, what is it that has this value, or what is in U.S.
what's creating that?
Yeah,
value?
What's creating it? When you compare Bitcoin to dollars, or you exchange them, the exchange rate of these two assets has always favored Bitcoin since the inception of Bitcoin. It's continued to go up nominally in U.S. dollars. It's continued to go up nominally in it takes less Bitcoin for me to buy a house. It continues to go up in the amount of gold I can purchase, amount of ounces I can purchase with a Bitcoin, again, continues to appreciate in value against the greater basket of assets or goods available in human existence.
And I would say that's
why.
Yeah, that's exactly why we're looking at that as a hedge against the currency debasement,
You're
right?
Exactly right.
That's
why we're
here. That case. I guess my question is what happens when, not necessarily against the dollar, but what happens when people stop valuing that Bitcoin?
Hey, it's no secret to us. We look at the demographics of this show. We know that a lot of you listening are actually other financial professionals and other investment advisors. We want to go ahead and invite you, if you're looking to do something different in your career, go ahead and reach out. We're always looking to bring on high quality people that understand how to do the planning process, align with our values, and are looking to deliver high value to their clients. Please just go ahead and reach out to us. You can get us on our website, ducharmewealth.com, and we look forward to talking to you.
What happened when Mom and Dad stopped valuing the VHS cassettes? They sold them. They got rid of them. They traded them.
So if nobody's buying,
if there is no demand for any asset, it's going to zero. So again, these are all things, fundamental market forces and economics of every asset class. It's not just Bitcoin. It can be anything. We've got to think like this. We've got to, no one teaches us this either. In high school, they don't say, hey, how do we value these things?
Well, I think that brings up a really quick point that I want to touch on, which is the secret 6th episode that will be in the series, which is around the midterm planning nature. Because over the long term, I kind of have this, boiled down in a simplified term, if they're increasing the money supply, they're inflating money at 2% a year is their stated target, and you hold something that protects its value, you sort of have this built-in 2% dividend. If you sort of think, simple framework. In the short term, though, right, like Bitcoin can have this like 80% drawdown, and it can do 150% a year, and then it can lose 60%, and then it can go up 50, right? It can be very volatile. But the return of that is all exogenous. What we're talking about here is it's all about what somebody else values it to be, right? And that's why this supply demand, as it's changing on this very inelastic asset, changes rapidly. But there is an asset though, and so when you say like, well, if the demand stops for any asset goes to zero, and it's actually not entirely true. And so now I have to drag out of the closet one of the most hated the asset class I probably hate the most out of any of them, right? Like
zero demand for it.
A bond.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so it's a bond, truthfully. So debt instruments, rather than equity ownership, there's a contractual obligation. So, I could borrow money to Carissa here. I borrow her $1,000 and she's going to pay me, $80 a year, which is an 8%, coupon. Mm-hmm. And I might go to you and say, hey, I need my money back. I borrowed Carissa. Like, would you be interested in buying my bond? And you might look at the current market and say, yeah, in fact, I'll give you $1,050, because that was a really good rate you ever locked into for me as an investor. Or you might say, hey, the interest rates now are 15, so I'm only going to give you $600,
mm-hmm.
but I'll cash you out at $600. Yeah. And what you're saying is, at a certain point, if I try to sell that bond and everyone says, no, I don't want it, zero.
Yep.
Yeah, I won't take it for $1. Well, then what I'm stuck with is there's still value because there is intrinsic value. There is an endogenous return in the contract that she still has to pay me $80. So there is still value. It doesn't go truly to zero. And that is probably the one exception, right? So Apple stock, if no one wants to buy an iPhone anymore and their product sucks and no one wants it, it goes to zero, right? Apple bonds might even go to zero, but they really probably won't unless there's a default judgment, right? But a bond does have that endogenous return. So even if there's not the demand out there for it, you can hold on to it and still get the cash flows that are internal within the contract of the investment, right?
Yeah, back to the first point we made about network size and liquidity.
Yeah.
Right, being able to exchange that for something. I guess the point is, right, like, yeah, you're right. If there's zero demand at all and you are stuck with her bond, you will get paid back, hopefully, if you're good. Yeah. And at the end of the day, you get that, right? But if you try to sell it or try to exchange it for something, you're not going to be able to exchange it with zero demand until you get something else back from her, not her bond, but the dollars for you to make the change.
Well, and that's the biggest downside to bonds that no one talks about, right? Is that you have a contract to get paid back, but you have a contract to get paid back in dollars. Mm-hmm. This is my issue sometimes with insurance companies when people talk about how great insurance contracts are. And I say, give me a term life insurance policy, or give me a whole life policy that I can get paid out in a predetermined ounces of gold or a predetermined number of Bitcoin, or, not dollars. I don't, it doesn't exist. And for a reason. It's way they can't make that work in the numbers. This is the short answer why. I think it's fair to realize that there is this different return profile, and it does make different investments different. But going back to the risk conversation, right? Risk is like energy. It can't be created or destroyed, only converted. You can say, hey, I want an investment with an internal endogenous return profile to it, right? I want the returns to be kind of predetermined or from within the investment itself. But you're kind of making the deal that I want the dollars then, right? So you might get the dollars. The dollars might be not worth very much. Yeah. And therein lies the problem with being too heavily allocated on bonds or CDs or this sort of thing, right?
Yeah, that goes into the conversation about units of measure.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin has a very unique makeup of it, its protocol, its actual script that it's built upon, is based in logic. The same stuff that we're talking Galileo math here. We're talking, logician math. It's a simple arithmetic type. 1 + 1 = 2. There's no fooling these universal laws, and because of that, because it's the rule book of this network of Bitcoiners, all follows this protocol. We get this incredible, predictable, and more precise ability to measure things across space and time. Yeah. We can look in the future and we can know that there will always be X amount of units. And if I have a certain amount of those units, I can calculate real quick the ratio of total net worth or total amount of that asset that I own. Back to your point with gold, underneath us right now, or our listeners at home, underneath you, there may be a ton of gold, 2 tons of gold in the ground. We don't know. You don't know how much gold there is in the earth. Because of that reason, we don't know how much gold will be available 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now as technology it progresses. And Elon Musk, shoots his rockets up and pulls down gold asteroids. We don't know how many of those units or ounces of gold, the actual unit of measure in this value, how many there will be. And this creates a degree of risk and a degree of uncertainty in the future. But with Bitcoin, we've controlled for that particular aspect of this monetary unit of value. Yeah. And because of that, it brings some reduction in calculating value and calculating who has what on the Bitcoin ledger over time, because it can be audited every 10 minutes in its fullness. Think how long it takes your organization to do an audit, or the U.S. government right now, who is shut down, right? For I don't know how many days into this. We're all talking about how we value everything in this U.S. government dollar, which is so fantastic, except for the fact that the thing that's issuing it and backing it is shut down right now. And no one thinks of that as a risk. Like, oh, the dollar's just magically still working.
Don't say no one.
Okay. Well, the point is, it doesn't cross most people's minds. Yeah.
That's
the
true.
fact is that this unit of measure, by declaration, which is what fiat means in Latin or in Greek, you get this scenario where it's like the thing that's declaring it as valuable and is issued for this purpose and is collect taxes in it. I'll defend it with nuclear weapons and tanks and violence. It's shut down right now. That network is shut down.
I think that's a little bit of a hyperbole, Aaron, but I get the point you're trying to make.
I mean, the point is that there is execution risk that comes with a centralized system.
Well, the risk right now is that they if they're not open, they're not printing. That's the risk, right? But I kind of have this joke about stored alpha and stored volatility. They're probably stored printing, so they're not printing this minute, but when they open back up for business, they'll print print all the opportunities they missed to print money on. They'll still print. But the network effect, though, if I go to Mexico right now, they'll still take my dollars. I can still swipe my Visa card everywhere. So I think the network isn't shut down. The government en masse. I mean, the troops are still going to war right now, or they're still showing up at PT formation at 5:30. I painfully know. I mean, I was active duty in the shutdown in 2018 during Trump 1. I'm very aware they still have to show up to work.
Yeah, I don't mean to introduce hyperbole into the conversation, but I do inject history into the conversation. And empires have fallen, and lots of them. Yeah, and their currencies fall at the same time. And if we were in a healthy trajectory and things were running as we all wish and hope and think that they will into the future in perpetuity, I'd feel a lot more comfortable about things. But in reality, we have 34, 37 trillion, I don't know what it is, $1 trillion in debt. We have a dysfunctional Congress that can't work with each other. And we have the threat of potentially, very indigent people needing SNAP food benefits, some people really not being able to get paychecks. We have air traffic controllers not getting paychecks. We're seeing some cracks in a centralized system. Yeah. And this is a major player in this network. We're not talking about, St. George went offline, so, the US dollars and St. George are in trouble. we're talking about a larger thing that when we have the issuing organization and backing organization starts to struggle, people lose faith in the US dollar. Now back to the debasement trade. You guys were just talking about it. Why did gold do so well this year? Why is Bitcoin doing well? Is it because the full faith and credit of the United States is improving and getting better, and that its bonds are actually getting more valuable?
Well, I think this is a really great point, Aaron. To segue
good.
into
Now we're getting somewhere.
We've got probably about another 5 minutes,
Oh,
10
okay.
minute worth of attention span for people here
Okay.
on this topic. But in the last couple weeks, what we've actually seen is Bitcoin lose its relative strength in the marketplace, and the dollar compared to U.S. dollars.
Okay.
So priced in U.S. dollars.
Okay.
There's weakness being exhibited in the Bitcoin market the last couple weeks, and especially the last couple days.
What are we at? 107,000?
Yeah, 100. Yeah,
I don't even know what
I don't
we're
know.
at. I looked at my watch. It doesn't say anything.
About today. But yeah, today's about 107,000. High was what?
So
like 120,
Went from
121.
125 to 107
Yes, not disastrous. I'm not.
in U.S. dollars.
In U.S. dollars.
Yeah.
The U.S. dollar is measured by the DXY, the DXY index, which is a cross-currency index, is exhibiting strength and positive trend. And gold is a little bit weak, and bonds had a rough day yesterday and today, but bonds in U.S. Treasury bonds have actually been showing some positive trend. So I think what I'm getting at is I'm not trying to, fly in and take a crap on Bitcoin here.
Oh, yeah.
What I want to highlight is this is the risk of Bitcoin, right? Is that, and it's really not Bitcoin, it's any asset, right? Is that we can look and say, okay, point A is 2009, Bitcoin's at 0. Point B is 2050. 50 years later, and Bitcoin's at 1 million, right? But if you can't handle watching $1 million go to 200,000, right? Then it's probably not for you to put $1 million in Bitcoin, right? Because there's within those larger cycles, there are sub-cycles, and there's even cycles within the sub-cycles.
Sure.
And so depending on the time frame you're looking at, you have to be able to look at things and say, okay, I want to think about where Bitcoin's going to be at in a couple of years, but I also need to be able to look at my financial plan and say, if it doesn't hit there, it hits, not D, but C instead. Do I have other assets that, I feel confident in, or, hey, is there an explanation for why there's this counter trend? Essentially on a larger time scale, you would say this is just a counter trend rally. Treasury's doing good and Bitcoin, weak. That's not going to last.
Yeah.
Well, if it's not going to last, that means you're zooming out to a time frame that says, well, let's just counter to the bigger trend.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like
this
it
is
happens,
not
but
financial advice by any means, and anything on this podcast it shouldn't be construed. This is mostly education. But when I'm talking about Bitcoin, I'm actually not talking about investments. Period. Hands full stop. I'm looking at the camera. I don't invest in Bitcoin. Now, I've got 98% of my net worth in Bitcoin. I save my time, energy, value for my future in this asset because it's anchored in scarcity. I know exactly how many units there are, and I know there's not going to be any more of those units. Because of that reason, I can calculate what portion of that network I own at any given time, every 10 minutes. That to me is more valuable right now than the unknown of what I've lived through in my lifetime. You said, hey, Bitcoin's only been alive for 17 years. Well, the average human's probably going to work 30, maybe 40 years in their existence. So we're halfway through my working lifetime, actually a little bit more. I'm a little older than you. And I think about it and I say to myself, I've only got 10 years left. What am I supposed to save my money in? What am I supposed to save my future in? And that's where, if you're looking at a small time horizon from the beginning of January till today, or if you're looking for, I got to do that down payment for my house next week, Yeah, there's a lot different calculations that go into these things in terms of liquidity and what you're going to barter or trade. But when it comes to just over the arc of time right now, there's things that are gaining in value against the other basket of goods, and there's things that are losing against those other baskets of goods. Right now, I would assert to you that the US dollar may, in the short term, looking great, but over the long term, really suffering. I brought something in my bag. So what I did for this audience, for this podcast, is I took a ruler, which is a standard 12-inch ruler here, and I equated it to a US dollar unit of value in 2005. Yes, I got that right. So 2005, 1 unit of value in 2005, this is how many inches would be available in 1 unit of US dollars. From there, I created one here that's the financial crisis, 2008. So 3 years difference. And if you compared these two, and this might be a little bit difficult, I'm not sure. But as you can see, the 2005 versus the 2008, that there was a reduction in value. And what are we measuring here? We're actually using the government issued CPI index, which hopefully that CPI is still available while they're shut down. I'm not sure, but hopefully gets anyway, you see this, and here's 2010, and we can keep going down the line. And if we go all the way down the line to the year 2025, you can see a unit value of the US dollar versus a unit value US dollar in 2025. We're at 7.5 inches versus 12 inches. Now you may say, that's only 20 years, Aaron. Bitcoin's 17 years, and it went from 0 to 100,000, went kind of a different direction. But if you even expand longer out, this right here, this little thing right there, this represents the dollar from, if we normalize the US dollar in 1925, 100 years ago, this is what it would look like in terms of its value loss over that period of time. Your audience is receiving an incredible endowment of alpha right now. The debasement trade, to me, is the last trade that exists. This is it. What you're seeing is people being woken up to this idea that fiat currency is not what it's been cracked up to be. It's not doing what we have been told it's done. And inflation, silent theft, has been robbing all of us every single year for a very long time. Honestly, I really sincerely don't care what asset class or classes anybody chooses to be allocated in. What I do care about is that you understand that there are big differences between all of them, and your needs are going to be different than somebody else. Make sure you find somebody that understands these principles as your portfolio manager, as your portfolio, guider or guidance, guidance beacon, your signal. Have them help you through this process in a way that puts you in more control than just, hey, look, the number of dollars in my bank account is higher than it was yesterday. Because that's not what really matters. It's what those dollars can be exchanged for in your future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's where I would leave it, is just, Bitcoin for me has outperformed every other asset class I've ever used, but that's across the arc of time. And the arc of time for me started in 2014, 2015, right in that era, right? I don't think this is over. I don't think this is ending. We're starting to monetize our debt in the US government. And with this much debt and with the interest rates of where they're at, we are going to pay more and more and more of our precious time and resource value, our GDP, in interest to other countries. And it's going to come at a great cost to our society. It's going to be hard.
Yeah.
So that's where I would leave it.
I think I want to, I appreciate you wrapping up the thoughts around debasement there. I think there's one last thing that I really, really want to make sure that we get to in this episode that I think is really important.
Okay.
And it's, if you look at the asset classes that I talk about, when I talk about the rest of them, there's a commonality, right? If you look at, when I say high quality real estate, particularly in my opinion, residential real estate, right? There's a lot of options. Large cap US stocks, a lot of options. Precious metals, not a lot, but a number of options, right? You can get some diversification even within that asset class. Liquid alternatives. There's a lot of different. We'll do a whole episode on what the heck even is a liquid alternative.
Yeah, I'm interested in that because
and then, but I don't say crypto. I say Bitcoin.
Yeah,
that's
critical.
And I think that's so. Help us understand really quick and help the audience why Bitcoin and why not if you're and again, this isn't to speak ill of other projects or whatever. It's just to say from the lens of debasement, why Bitcoin? Why not Ethereum or Solana, XRP, Fartcoin, whatever else is out there? Right?
The other 22,000 options you have.
Yeah. Why Bitcoin?
Yeah. So I kind of said it out loud, but maybe didn't draw enough attention to it. And that is that I view when you purchase Bitcoin, I consider it an operation of savings. You're saving. When I look at any other cryptocurrency, all 22,000, any other one, I look at that as an investment. Now, the distinction difference is that each of those other coins, or I should say most of them, like 99% of them, will have a team, will have talent, will have money, will have ownership, will have IP, will have a corporation, will have an entity, or some other legal backing that has control of that project's trajectory and execution. With that comes a lot of risk when it comes to, let's say, like regulatory risk, political risk, taxation risk, operational risk, geopolitical risk, you name it. They're like businesses. They're run like businesses. They have marketing teams, they have executives, they have operators, they have things that they have to do, right? If you look at Meta, remember they created the Libra coin at one point, and you would all agree that Meta or Facebook was a massive company and probably had the resources to make something like that work. Well, what happened? And what I like to point to as to why Meta's Libra coin didn't just blow up and take off and get all its value, and Bitcoin actually far outperformed it, had staying power, was that, Satoshi Nakamoto, the founder of Bitcoin, Congress doesn't have the power to subpoena Satoshi Nakamoto. They don't have the ability.
He's not even a real person.
Okay.
That we know of, right? I mean, that's a pseudonym, right? It's not a.
I don't know. It's,
she,
it, they, God, alien, third Nephite. I don't know what you believe in. It could be anybody. The point is there was something or somebody on the other side that named themselves Satoshi Nakamoto. That person cannot be subpoenaed, cannot be sued, cannot be killed, cannot be held hostage if they don't meet their shareholder demands.
Mm-hmm.
None of that exists. So when you carve out all of that and what's left is just this protocol in space and time that runs regardless of whether the U.S. government declares it good or bad, or whether China decides to ban it for the 9th time or not, it does not matter. Bitcoin doesn't care. Bitcoin doesn't care what Aaron Olson thinks, what Brandon thinks. It doesn't care what Larry Fink thinks. It doesn't care what anybody thinks. Bitcoin runs by itself and will continue to run. And because of that reason, it is truly decentralized. That right there, it's the biggest difference for me. It has this almost divine progeny, this divine background where the owner created it and then walked away. And that is what I'm most interested in when it comes to a working protocol. It works by itself. It just goes. It doesn't need anybody else to make it run. So that's where I feel that there's no control over this thing, at least in the foreseeable future, where it's exercised to such a degree that it can be compelled or it can be cornered or it can be manipulated or spoofed into doing something. Whereas a lot of the other markets in this world have been captured, are being spoofed, are being traded on trade desks or high frequency trading, are being manipulated. Corruption is influencing those areas. We just haven't seen that in this nascent class yet.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interesting information.
Well, it's a really important distinction,
Yeah.
right? When I think you look at crypto and you say because it's so easy to say like, oh, that's that manipulated stuff, or it's all digital, this or that, or it's like, so which crypto, and that's a really interesting take that you said too, by the way, about like each project is kind of like a company.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I kind of feel like I intuitively knew that, but really hadn't connected it in that directive of framework. But all of a sudden that does make more sense, right? I think the biggest thing for me on why Bitcoin and not Ethereum is like it's not only decentralized, but I'm not aware of another project that is absolutely 100% finite as well.
Yeah, there are other projects that can be mathematically shown on the protocol level in the script that they are finite as well. There are, but
they don't have the network effect, right? They're not widely adopted.
Yeah. Again, so I said one example as to why I think it is different, but we could go into 10 different ones. The next one is the network size.
Yeah.
Like if you wanted to compete with Amazon, like what is it going to take for you to open up an online store and be the next Amazon? How long or how much resource do you need to compete with Bezos's empire? Like what does that look like? It is once you've reached 2 magnitudes, 3 magnitudes larger than the next big thing, right? What like good luck chasing down that thing. Good luck being able to overcome.
Well, that's the stranglehold that the U.S. dollar has currently on all the other fiat currencies around the world.
You're right. You're right.
That's 100% what's playing out. When you talk about like, and this is it. Oh man, we're so over time, but. It's
do a lot of cutting.
Well, people talk like, oh, the dollar's collapsing. Well, the dollar's not really, like, what does that even mean? And I always ask them, collapse against what?
Thank you.
Because, and the reason I say that is like, that's weird because the dollar's going up, and people don't even realize like, what do you mean the dollar's going up? I'm like, there's an actual index, the dollar index, the DXY, and it's actually pretty strong.
I've shown you that it doesn't, it's not going up.
But compared to what?
Well,
because compared
to all of the assets,
compared to its units of measures in buying cans of corn, you're absolutely right. In its terms right now, in its ability to buy euros or Japanese yen, other fiat currencies, it's exhibiting relative strength, right?
To other fiat.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying?
It's the best fiat in the race.
Yeah, and in the dorky finance circles I run in, we say it's the cleanest dirty shirt in the laundry.
Sure.
You really don't want to get something out of the laundry, right?
Sure.
But if that's all you have an option, you don't, right? You go to the laundry and you say, which one's the cleanest in the bin?
I get it. I totally get it.
And so you get the dollar. But I think that's like an important thing for people to think about though, in the context of this whole debasement thing, because I will talk to people that will say, well, I want to invest in stocks, international stocks in developed markets or emerging markets because the dollar's going to crash. Mm-hmm. Well, the dollar's not crashing relative to those other currencies. In fact, they're potentially even worse. I think there's a bigger case to be made in other foreign currencies. Like we have a great fortune and privilege of living in the U.S. and living our lives in U.S. dollar nominal terms everywhere we go and everything we do. You may be the one person that I know in the U.S. that doesn't, but if you're in one of those other countries, it's even more compelling, right? Like, because if you're bad to the U.S. dollar, and we're sitting in the U.S. dollar world saying this thing sucks, we gotta not own these. We gotta own assets that are going to go up relative to this. We got to own the numerator because the denominator is killing itself. Then if you're in something that's even losing to the denominator, right? That's really uncompelling.
Well, each of these asset classes has a difference, right? Like we just mentioned Bitcoin versus 22,000 other coins. We mentioned the dollar versus the peso versus yuan versus the euro, right? We talked about land in Las Vegas Boulevard, Miami Beach, or in St. George, Utah. We can talk about bonds, U.S. bonds, or we talk about euro bonds. Which bonds, But
euro bonds priced in dollars. How about that?
Exactly. So it's a little bit more nuanced than all of this. I think people, what we should all invite people to do is just think a little bit more deeply about what they're trading when they're trading these things.
Yeah.
You know, you literally are selling dollars to McDonald's and they're selling Big Macs. That is happening right there, right? And you're making a distinction. You're saying, like, how many of these dollars am I willing to sell for a Big Mac? And you're figuring that out. We just need to think about that a little bit deeper on all that we do, and then put time on top of it. 5 years from now, where do I want to be? 10 years from now, where do I want to be? What do you really want in your future? And that can change too, right? As we get older, as we change, as our family situations or businesses change. So again, just be more intentional on the way that you think your future is going to end out.
Sure.
And if you're trying to plan for it, try to use a unit of measure or a unit of value that predictably will be the same amount in the future that it will today against that thing that you want, against that other thing you're going to trade for. So just don't think nominally about things. Think about its value.
Yeah.
And then we win. Yeah.
It will undoubtedly be a rough road ahead in a lot of ways. I think about where we're at. Somebody asked me yesterday about Ray Dalio and his comments and a lot of what he thinks about. And I think in a lot of ways he's right. And I think it's, the Bitcoin idea is a manifestation of that in some regard, right? But that's not to say that there won't be, really great years in the U.S. or that there isn't a Congress that for a period of time maybe does put the financial controls on for one session. I don't even know that'll ever happen, but maybe one session, right? Like maybe one session they could get the financial controls on of Congress.
Maybe it doesn't. Maybe we go back to Bretton Woods and we just change it up again, like we've done it before in the past. And we say, hey, new monetary unit. We're using gold again. We're using Bitcoin this time. They may just change it.
Yeah. And I think that's, for me as a wealth manager, obviously you're very concentrated in one particular asset class. It's worked out very well for you. And I'm happy for your success, right? As a wealth management advisor, I can't really advise that. I just don't think that that's, prudent, candidly, right? Like now it's your thing and that's okay. But I think that people should be considering the diversification effects that they can take something that they don't comprehend or understand as in depth that you do. And then maybe it's the depth and the knowledge and the expertise that you feel you have in Bitcoin that allows you to feel comfortable riding this roller coaster ride of the Bitcoin ups and downs, right? And the average person has a tough time with the stock market, let alone Bitcoin, right? So my point is you have to have diversification and build a portfolio that grabs return streams from different places. The drivers of the return are different, and the correlations amongst the assets and when they should be doing well or lagging or leading, it builds a little bit smoother of a ride. I think that smoother ride will still be relatively bumpy over the coming years. I don't think this is a linear ride, print 15% a year, and people should be still prepared for that. And I think that's where the good quality financial planning that people can do and should be doing helps compensate for that. But all those things together helps get you to the end destination of preserving your value, growing your resources so that you can pursue the more meaningful things in life. Like you said, your trade, your playing the piano better art, better music,
better father, better mother,
like you spend time with what
are we doing with that time?
You're seeking your spiritual enlightenment, whatever that is for any particular person. I think that's the idea, is to enable us to do those things and not have to be worrying about how to buy the next proverbial cheeseburger.
Oh, exactly. Just to close this out again, because you just spurred just like this great idea for me. It's like just economies between people and communities, they were emergent. It came before government did. It came before the declaration of Caesar's coin. And we were able to make it, and we did it. Genetically, my ancestors left Mother England and Denmark and these places. And because the taxing was too great, they crossed the great Atlantic and came here and was willing to let go of an old system and pick up a monetary system that was foreign to them. And when that didn't work out and they got kicked out of those towns and got pushed west further and further, that community figured out how to make it work without this idea that there must be a government, there must be a unit, and there must be this coordinated effort, or else we're all going to die or it won't work. And I really push back at that against that assertion. I'm here protesting inflation. I'm here because, and then the reason why I'm in Bitcoin is because it helps me against that thing. If the US dollar did not have this problem, I don't think I would be interested. But that is why I'm here. That's why I was in gold before Bitcoin came along, is because I saw that my value that I saved and worked hard for was being robbed at 2-3% a year. And there was nothing I could do about it. And it's being robbed in such a way they have no control over it. And if you introduce things like taxes on land for your residential investment, right? Eminent domain or property taxes going up this year or next year, do we really think that our governments, when they run out of cash, and they really do run out of cash, that they're not going to just simply say, like they've done in the past, we need more revenue, we need to raise taxes? They will eat. They will pay their paychecks. And Bitcoin makes it so that isn't always an option for them. So that's where I'm at. I want inflation to go away. I want governments to live within their budgets and spend fiscally minded in a way that we have to. I have to live. I can't print my own currency. I've got a finite amount of time that I convert my energy into tokens of value that I provide for my family. I imagine you two guys do the same thing. I am sick and tired of my savings, the thing for my future, being robbed right from underneath my nose. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm allocated the way I am. And this debasement trade is a real thing. It's a scary, real thing that's happening. And so get guidance, get educated, get whatever you need to do it. Build your confidence in the asset class that you do end up buying. Be diversified, sure. Like, you don't think I have second options. I do. You know what I mean? But that being said, think, be intentional about this, really work at it. So I appreciate you guys both inviting me on the podcast again and talking about this. I'm passionate about it. I do care. I hope everybody, sincerely, I hope your audience and I hope your clients do well, because we deserve just to live, not have to think about how we're going to live in the future.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
So, well, I always appreciate the time, Aaron, and your thought, and it's always great to have a great friend. So, yeah,
you bet. Anytime. I appreciate the friendship too. Thanks.
Well, everyone, you know where to find us, ducharmewealth.com. If you have any questions, reach out, go ahead, send us a message. Feel free to comment anywhere you're seeing this video, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. If you comment on Apple Podcasts, I don't know that I have a way to check that. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, maybe send us an email or message. Anyways, we will see you guys all out there. Always open to comments, questions, concerns, jokes, hate mail, and all the rest. We will see you, and we wish everyone well.